And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of new things happening here at KTFRN. We brought on a few new shows. Of course, Shadowland Voyagers on Sunday nights from 5 to 7. Right after that, Live Free FM with Paranoid, Nathan Frazier. And after that, Donnie Gilson, 32 Degrees of Insanity. It's a great Sunday night lineup. Saturday nights, Beyond 2012 airs 2 hours prior to us. And every Tuesday we have The 100th Monkey with Tom and Ramon. It's a really, really good show. I'm sure a lot of you have checked out the archives, but you can tune in live every Tuesdays from 5 to 7. And, of course, Free Talk Live, Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis, Freedom Links with Joe Joseph, and many, many more, and many more to come. And like I mentioned before the break, Hangar 18 every Friday from 9 to 11 Pacific Time. Did I say Central? I think I might have said Central. Everything's in Pacific Time, so if I said Central, just strike that. It's all in Pacific Time. Used to being on the other network where we were Central. And we've also got a cool little clock here, too, that if you go to the schedule page and click on your time zone, it will tell you the times in your time zone.
That's really neat.
Yes, and now what I'm working on, too, for the future is this clock, once you push it, then the time zones at the top that show what shows are coming on will also change to your current time zones, too. So we're working on that function. Hopefully we'll get that up. And, of course, we are also bringing on Bob Tuskin from the Bob Tuskin Radio Show. 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock Pacific right here on KTFRN, brought to you by the Intel Hub.
Excellent.
Yes, great lineup. And 7 of Resistance 2010 needs to come on and do a show here on KTFRN.
Yes,
so
he does.
Maybe we can twist his arm a little bit. Maybe you guys can send him some emails and say, hey, you need to go to KTFRN because their quality is awesome. They broadcast in CD stereo quality, and we've actually upped the free archives too to make them a little bit more, a little better quality, because I was listening to some of the free archives and I was going, quality's not that good. We need to up it a little bit. It's going to take more server space. I'm going to have to upgrade the server quicker than what I wanted to, but it's worth it because I want to present the highest quality presentations for not just our show, but for all the shows out there. So 7, welcome back to the broadcast.
Oh, it's definitely great to be here. And, I definitely want to make that collaboration, just to let you know. There's nothing holding me back from doing it except for just getting the rest of the information to you. I did text you on that briefly about an entirely new level of how we can collaborate, a platform that'll give a masterful lesson for everyone and just very integrated with pictures, videos, and the whole nine. So I'm definitely going to get with you on that since you put it on air and I feel respond. But it's a beautiful thing, to be able to start to link up. That's what we have to do. We do have to start pulling in our resources and doing what we need to do because we were designed, of course, to function as a unit. And so I'm with you. Just know that it's all in timing, and it looks like right now it's time.
It is time. We're 7 days away from December 21st. What's going to happen on December 21st? We're getting married on December 21st. We know that as a fact. But
we know what we're going to be doing.
We know, yeah, but what else is going to happen?
That's
the $50 million question, isn't it?
Or you're asking that guy, that can spend currency like that. I can get a $50 million question answered. And, I think we have one card passing around. We were saying we traffic information really on the level of whatever you want to know that's important. We're definitely going to have the answer to it because we have to be in the know. The good thing is we give that information to everyone as free as we can. And so that's really, what's going on at the Resistance website. So just to get right into this, I'm definitely feeling like a heavyweight now in this because, of course, I talk about things that, people really don't, look at times. And then it's a little uncomfortable when we do talk about it. But I will say tonight we're not going to have any, yoni or phallus conversations.
Thank you.
It's getting a little graphic, but, I was just trying to explain the reproduction energy system of the vortex implosion, but, it wasn't coming out right. So
well, we had a few of our female listeners writing us saying they've really enjoyed hearing that.
Yeah.
I'm out of date.
Let me ask you this, Evan. I don't know if you've seen this latest report by NASA, but supposedly they have found Planet X, and it's coming with some UFOs, and this is straight off of NASA's website with satellite images. I haven't had a chance to look into it too deeply. Donnie Gilson is a better person who can talk about that, and he does that every Sunday right here on KTFRN from 9 to 11. So if you guys are missing that, make sure you tune in. But have you seen any of this, and what do you make of it?
Okay, well, first, let me just let everyone know, just what a great coincidence. I'll tell you what X means, because you have to know what X means for you to understand what kind of planet they're talking about and what could be. An X, if you notice, if you put two sticks on top, are two triangles. Okay, now look at an X, and you see two triangles. Now, if those two triangles happen to interlace, you get what's called a Megan star, or also the symbol that you find in water, or a hexagram, some people know it by, but you get that particular symbol, or what the star that's on the star of Israel. And so it's important for us to see that the X was known in history by the adepts and the ancients to be the symbol of this new God that the world has fallen sway under and is about to break themselves out of. But this God was known as the Axe God, because notice how axe and X sound the same. Of course, their faction tends to be the Axes. And when you really get deep into it, you find X is 10, meaning Alpha and Omega. And we can remember there's a God that says, I'm the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. But the symbol really says that it has to do with energy, or two opposing forces coming together to create energy. So when you're talking Planet X, you're talking about basically the agenda that everything has been peeking into as these quote unquote elder gods attempt to make another arrival. And according to the ancient texts, if you notice, humanity's dominion began about 5,000 years ago. This is not something that's been going on for a long time, but long enough. I'm tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But what we're dealing with is anytime they're talking about civilization is synonymous with domestication. Mm-hmm. So it basically means all the freeness that you could ever have to achieve the greatest potential starts to become governed, literally. And so that's really, of course, where I tend to start beginning my dissertations these days for showing people what exactly is going on in the reality. So I go back about 5,000 years ago to Nimrod and to the other kings then, also known as the Elohim, who were basically creating a structure or a hierarchy or a pyramidal system of control over our world. And now, out of anything that people should see 2012 is that right now we are living in a way that we never used to live. We have access to knowledge that we never used to have access to for the last 5,000 years. So this is really coming out of the dark ages for us. They didn't want you to be a doctor or a surgeon or even to read, let alone thinking and knowing that you're God, and even be above God, is what that name means, above God potential. You see, so why would they want to give you the knowledge about that? In addition, when we start really looking at it, we find the masses, which we make up, that we're the majority, have always been for the last 5,000 years very illiterate, thinking that the world is flat, because when you look out and you look across a plane, it looks flat. That's where that whole idea comes from. It's not just, they're really stupid. It's like if you look out for a long time, you'd be like, this looks flat. But of course, the earth is round. But the only people who actually knew that the earth was round were those who traveled the seas.
Well, I have to disagree with you, though, because I look up at the sky and it looks like a fishbowl.
A dome.
Yeah, it looks like and I can't help but think of that Pink Floyd song. We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl. It's so true.
I tend to see 2D at times in order so I can see 3D properly. But as a whole, I think that most people, like in the indigenous times, when they looked out over the expanse and the horizon of the ocean, which of course all this has to do with the sea, and the sea is synonymous with the sky. They saw this horizon or flat line, which gave them the thought, because no one had ever crossed over many areas of the seas, that the actual place was really flat, just as a logical I'm looking at it. I think in this tense also, I'm not really talking about the sky, guys. I'm talking about the actual ground. So how they saw that Earth was flat and that there was going to be a cliff at some point that you were going to fall off. And so that's, again, I'm just highlighting the level of knowledge that the people had been subject to during a certain period of time where we weren't allowed to learn anything.
Right.
And language was the priesthood. Because if you really understand what language can do and the components of language, to understand an ancient language before English and these type of languages came along, you would know that all those symbols, which they would then become, had to do with the priesthood. So I really wanted to, just to tell people, you know, at this point, for us to continue to deal with something that's really a spiritual situation, from a physical or material level, it's not going to be a good idea for us. Meaning that we're being encouraged to deal with the situation that we're facing in our world on a material and a fleshly level, because the quote unquote so-called controllers they're masters of material. So this is really the only domain that they're comfortable in. And the reason is because the knowledge of phi, which has everything to do with creating things in the material reality, and also photon manipulation, which has everything to do with, as we see the six-pointed star, what you see in a water crystal, and also what you see the sun, when you take a picture of it, it shows up as this hexagonal field, or what they call a Merkaba. So it's important for us to see if that knowledge is now, even for us to go and Google and start getting a pretty decent understanding of it. The ancient people already had an understanding of it as far as the ones that were educated. So who were educated? And we find that in the ancient text, it talks about Malachim. And a Malachim, the term is synonymous with an angel, but Malachim also means a king. So these divine kings, quote unquote, that were put over humanity arrived here. That's when I'm coming to discover in all my, years and years of study and reading thousands of books, is that they arrived here and began evolving mankind. They're not our creators. They would love to say they are. But they've been evolving and tampering with the DNA, domesticating, blending, colonizing, and all sorts of stuff. And it's just been a field day for them. But meanwhile, many of us are getting really damaged in the system, and we actually are, in many senses, lost and not in control of our vehicle. Also, what is called shipwrecked. And so, I think that we need to look at why they're using maritime law. Even the word on, just not to skip over things here, but the word on, which you'll see in Anunnaki, which of course has everything to do with this 10th planet, but you also see on repeated several times over and over again in Sanskrit. You see, even Sanskrit connects to the Celtic language. And so you actually find that there's an interconnecting knowledge, an interconnecting system, or what you can call priesthood, that has been governing this world, at least for the last 5,000 years. Now, the old symbolism for these individuals was a snake. The new symbolism, because they had to kind of like change up how they do things, is actually a man. And how this works out on a spiritual level is that people literally went from worshiping snakes, and you can still see it, the remnants of it, if not, it's still going on in all cultures, to now a new religion where man, which the Roman introduced, is worshipped as the greatest, most powerful thing. So we have to look at now, of course, why a while ago everyone was worshiping the snake as a god. Was it just something, a figment of their imagination? Excuse me, I had to hit the mute on accident here, but was it a figment of their imagination, or was something really going on? And of course, when we look into the ancient texts, if we're willing to, we'll find that there was some type of connection with the spiritual level that these beings were on that was very akin to a serpent, a dog, or a wolf, and many of the other what's called a chthonic or nighttime character, or just basically a dark way of being. And so if you look in our society today, you can see, obviously, with the new occurrence with the children, there's some type of dark way of being that is roaming throughout the land. So we have to identify what that exactly is. Even though it moves about as if it's invisible, those with the spiritual eye can see it. And so when we isolate what this energy is, this energy that's starting to, or been pervading the land, encouraging men and women to get into heavy quarrels. This, of course, is why the gun thing is coming up again. Of course, the gun is in the shape of an L. And is because there became a time where the only thing that we ask from our God, which was then now synonymous with our king, was to defeat our enemies. And I think we're going on a break here in about 10 minutes. Okay, good. So to defeat our enemies. Now, if you think about it, in every single culture you're dealing with right now that are the hotbeds of the world, like Syria, in Israel, in all of these different places, they have a heavy profession of who their God is. But they each use different names for who they believe is God. And there's a reason for that. Because most of their prayers are for their God to allow them to defeat or to destroy their enemies. Now, what this automatically does, just from a psychological level, but of course definitely at spiritual levels, is it only really allows you to communicate with beings that can really carry out those kind of commands.
Right,
right. And that's like a very key point, because we find in the ancient books that there were a group of beings that they were warlike gods.
Well, let me jump in for just a second. We had E.A. Coetting, Black Magician, on the show not too long ago, and he says that when he really wants to wreak havoc upon somebody, he will call upon angels, not demons. He'll call upon Gabriel or Michael.
Yes, because those angels are archons. They're archons from the Pauline system, where the same old entities that were doing it before, they wed their, I don't know if I use a plural of weed, but they snaked their way into just a new system. And they still hold tongue-tied for words here, but the names that are used for each of these individual beings still calibrate to the same vibration that they used to correspond to before, such as Michael, which is supposed to be the angel of God, the announcer. It also gives us our word microphone.
Yeah, it does.
The actual meaning of that is he who is like God. But wait a minute, if you examine that very closely, according to the entire laws of God and all this stuff, God encourages people to be like him. However, he says that those kind of people are Lucifer. You see what I mean?
Right.
And this whole thing going on in the Bible, it's all really it's a confusion. It's Babel itself. The Bible.
Well, what happened at the beginning of the Bible? They seem to have demonized the serpent god, killed the serpent god, made him the enemy, and then all of a sudden brought in this new god. So are these two different gods, or were the masks just changed?
Well, you have that going on, but you also have conspiracies wrapped inside of enigmas, inside of illusions, meaning that you actually have core symbolism that means something entirely different, and someone has taken it literal and made a real story out of it. Because when you're talking about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you're actually talking about the dual DNA, two strands of DNA, meaning that you're going to be in some type of conflict. When you're talking about an apple, you're talking about a pentagram, because you split the apple in half, there's a pentagram there. And when you're talking about different characters in this story, Adam even is congealed clay or blood. It has an entirely different meaning. It's something that really takes place on more of a molecular level than it does on a physical level. But of course, what the controllers have done is they've brought it out into the external world. And people have begun to interpret it as such and change it, etc. So I think, again, what we're really dealing with here is that we just have to see that.
7, we're at the break. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
Allà baix dins els canals, en el peu de la muntanya, pareix que sent picarols, suau si es mou la manada.
Behold, when ye entered into the city, there shall a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entereth in. And that man, of course, is Aquarius. And 7, I've got to ask you, we've talked about the serpent god, and we've talked about the god after that. What's happening now as we enter the age of Aquarius in just a week?
And this must be one of those divine shows, because that was just what I had typed in.
Nice.
I guess we would have to talk about Sirius too, but
you're tapped into the truth frequency, man.
And that's what's up, man. That's what I like. Aquarius is Orion. Obviously, he's the giant. He's the Nimrod. He's the king. in a sense that he's greater than man. This is how the level he puts himself on. These type of beings, because we're actually talking about live spiritual beings, sometimes called Gregor, meaning that almost like an idolized. So many people believed in it for so long, just having a king. Like even right now, notice in the media, there's a new baby that Prince William and the rest of them have, and they know that that baby will be the king and or either a king or a queen,
right,
by the whole lineage thing. So now what kind of craziness is this where the whole world is now looking to this household and saying, oh, who's going to be our new ruler? See, so this is serious stuff, though. That's why I say this is the control point is with spirituality, because every adept knows and every wise man and woman know that things take place on the spiritual plane before they take place here. Mm-hmm. You have the opportunity to prevent things that could happen here on the spiritual plane. But if you're trying to handle things on the material plane, it's like you're trying to clean up a mess or clean up holes or plug holes that keep being opened up, and you don't even know where they're being opened up from.
Well, you know what's funny? It's funny you mentioned that, because our wedding coming up on December 21st, that's what it's all about. It's all about the spiritual. We've made so many spiritual preparations that we forgot about the physical. And now we're going, okay, what are we going to wear? Because it's all about a spiritual union.
We're going to end up wearing our bathrobes.
But
on the mountain.
that's where the substance is, though, in this spiritual.
For sure. I mean, that's the key to this whole thing. It's all we got left. Like if people hear my voice transmit tonight, just know all you have left in this thing is your spirit, and it's all you need. Mm-hmm. The human being is magnificent. It's not something that we have to, it's just something that is. We were already installed with it. It's our gift. And so someone else has obviously been using it. That's kind of clear. Like when you go through history, and if you have enough wisdom and knowledge and diligence to stay with it, and you start looking at it, and then once you start it starts to reveal itself to you, meaning the truth, you just have to either accept it, or of course many choose to not accept it. So, let's get into this now. The Aquarius is the idea of the Nimrod, or the hunter. And the hunter in itself had its transformation into what we call a shepherd king. Mm-hmm. Is an individual who lives off the flock. So basically, we build the buildings, we erect the system, we use our minds, we create the ideas, we formulate all the different networks, and then they take the cream of our knowledge, and then they go and make something massive with it that they enjoy on their own.
Right.
Oh.
It's just like the pigs on the farm, an animal farm. They're the ones that, get to benefit from everybody else's work.
Right. And that's even a connotation there, because it's Ham. Ham was actually known as the tribe of brothers who really rose up first against the other brothers and started to divide the land amongst themselves.
That's right.
Meaning that there was a group of individuals in Crete that were, of course, very advanced. And they started like, okay, you get this area, I get this area. And the indigenous people, which many of us, the Gaelic tribes and the indigenous tribes in Aztec America and all that, all these people were just moving throughout the land, understanding how to deal with the earth, and then tapped into the earth and just trying to keep it calm, because it has its upheavals and things too.
Right.
It's not completely dead in this whole thing. It's just, again, the controllers have gotten themselves so advanced that they know how to manipulate earth. They know how to send hurricanes and stop hurricanes. They know how to make earthquakes and stop earthquakes.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of the macrocosmic way in which you make a woman infertile using birth control pills. And as long as you keep adding those chemicals to her supply inside of her body, she will be infertile. Literally. And it's the same exact thing. They're messing with the weather patterns so much, though, that she's reacting.
Well, yeah, that's a really deep insight there. Definitely, you're 100% on that. If they can artificially stop a natural process, then what makes us think they're not doing that to us? Mm-hmm. And of course, the whole awakening thing, though, is just knowing it could be possible. That's why the last thing that's generally installed in the human vehicle is the ego. Because the ego makes the person believe this is never going on. And if it is, it's not happening to them. Mm-hmm. It's happening to all these other people who they want to judge, but it's not happening to them. And that, because most of the knowledge still feeds on some type of external source. And this is a real thing. On the astral plane, it looks like cables and cords that we have connected to different things, and things have connected to us. And even some of the major ones that we actually need are generally the ones that are cut. This means like all of the connections that you really need to have been severed. And so it's almost like, you come in and you're almost like on a battleground that many of the victims that you see on the ground have already kind of sustained a great deal of damage. And this is kind of like, if you wanted to put it in another tense of a way to see this, it's like you arrive on a planet and most of the beings that are on the planet have been basically, excuse me, I'm looking for this word, opiates, okay, which is almost synonymous with opiates, which means serpents. It means that these urges, which the first place was called these urges that we think are our inclination to go and do things, but are actually attached to entities that live and exist in their own frequencies themselves. And I bring this up because notice how if just on a microcosmic level you have things like candida, will suggest to a person, candida is a worm that a person accumulates with eating a lot of sugar. It just suggests to the person all the time, hey, go get something sweet to eat. So it's not even the person's idea. It's the candida sending the signal that it needs this corresponding stuff to keep reproducing.
So it can feed off of it.
Oh yeah, and then continue to replicate. So everything is trying to survive. Let's just get that clear with the universe and the innerverse. Everything is trying to survive. So you have to set up some type of guard and governor of your own, not somebody else's, but over your own rights and means of what belongs to you, mainly your vehicles. Your mind, your body, and soul are yours. And so we start to get into how mind, body, and souls on individuals have been hijacked to a certain degree by what you can see as a trilateral commission. That's why you could see the triangle come into use here and know that these beings always carry pyramids around. Because notice how, again, if you have the mind, body, and soul, then you have this trilateral commission which handles spirituality, which is in the Vatican, in the Jesuit factions. The money, which is in Switzerland, which is where the pharaohs moved. You can see that on the Pharaoh show. And then also the military, which is Israel, and which is known as the soldier of God. That's what Israel means. And then also America. So it's interesting that all of this stuff is playing out, but we're like living through it somehow like the grunt workers. If you can kind of pull off of it and just look at yourself, it's like you're not even in the know to knowing that this is even going on, let alone playing a role. But then some people are actually playing major roles and don't even know it. Like, I think that personally what I've run into several times is just people that are connecting certain things and it equals something even major. And another person hears this. And it becomes a 3 degree of separation thing where all of a sudden individuals get timed perfectly the information that they need to receive when they need to receive it. There were things that I knew like 3 years ago that I didn't really put together properly in my mind that became the key points only a few days ago.
You know what? I'm right there with you. Mm-hmm. I've been listening to some of my old songs and they have I have found new meaning in them. I've listened even to the intro of our show and it has a new meaning. It's like I knew all of this, I put it together, but I didn't quite realize it until recently what exactly it meant.
Exactly. And I'm glad, and that's what I call that universal current, because if we're headed in the proper direction in retrospect, we should all be experiencing very close to the same thing if we've reached the right frequency. This is kind of how I like to analyze things sometimes rather than just diving into the occult world and Harry Potter and hobbits and stuff running around. But sometimes I also like to look at that just to see where our ancestors, how they really meshed over this matrix. Like how they understood things to be. And of course, we find that hidden in the language if we want to keep moving through this conversation. People need to understand that the pharaohs, first we have to finish the Orion story because that was the title of this entire show that we were doing today, was the identity of showing why there's a synonymous system going on with the word God and dog first. Now, always remember the reason why some words that are the exact same words are backwards is because in some languages it runs from left to right, and then other languages the language runs from right to left. Of course, Hebrew runs in one direction, English runs in another. But what happens if you have a word that actually can work in English and in Arabic? The people who are speaking it are just going to turn the word backwards, but it's going to be the same word. And that is the reason why God has a shadow, which he calls a shadow, is a dog. Now, if we look into the deeper text, we find that the character of Nimrod and Orion, the hunter gods, were all basically coalesced into the character Odin in the Odinic force, which they call the black current. Now, if you notice old Celtic pictures of Odin, you find that there are wolves there on his side. This is also the connection with Sirius, which we'll get into in just a moment. But you always see that whoever is saying that they're God, and I'll tell everyone now, it's this Celtic old Druid, high Druid tradition that people are binded under somehow, that the God always has a dog with them. Now, when it goes to Egypt, Osiris then becomes the Odin. He's the bearded white Santa Claus god with the long beard, the Quetzalcoatl that the indigenous are still expecting back, that bought them the things that advanced them. There's a sidebar to this conversation. When these beings, these Elohim, came to different tribes, man, they had stuff like barley, which was the first cereal. They had things that really meant something to people, not electronics. They had things that evolved people's whole way that they could actually live their lives, because most spent their time hunting and gathering. So these beings and men that had this knowledge were always looked up to as if they were gods, and they struck fear in people also with their technology. Here's a major connection with why El and electric and Elohim are the same, because they were the first ones to start displaying the use of electricity through the use of goat hair and amber.
Well, it's not only the use of technology, but also the use of understanding of the cosmos. If there was an eclipse coming, they would say, if you don't do what I say, the sun's not going to come back.
The snake will eat the sun.
Right.
Well, yeah, and then also here, the other component is the worship of light. Like, it's because they can call lightning. And when the sound of lightning can be intensified so much, it can literally shake things. And you see this character show up, by the way, if you want to know where they put it in the media. In the movie Stardust, when they go to the boat where Robert De Niro is, of course, he's playing the pirate, which is their symbolism. And of course, he's playing also the slightly homosexual role there. And you actually see the connection there. And to me, it's like, you're watching all this go on. And just as again, another sidebar to this, you're watching all this go on and you're wondering, why is this program playing out and I'm just watching it, waiting for myself to get to the conclusion of what I already know was going to happen according to the knowledge and the history and the books that they're studying from. Meaning that once you really understand the entire cult, you understand that whatever these guys introduced, it was a cult of death. Right. The symbol was a skull. That is the sign of the human when the human is already gone. Not when the human just got here, which is the sign of a baby. So what happens is that when that culture of death, which you see kind of weeding itself through the world and the indigenous world, was being passed by these Druidic priests, who also give us the root of the word church, which is cirque or circle, because what we call a church today, because all Christianity is Druidism, you just stood in a circle, and then they began to do the chants and the evocations of bringing in these energies, which are basically vibratory frequencies of us on past timelines when we didn't even know what we were doing most of the time, acting out in a lot of our animal natures. Meaning that what they're really trying to pull us into is something that we've already graduated. And that's also what makes us so much more advanced. So do you see, people have a natural inclination that if they know what's going on, they're going to start going in the other direction. It's just going to be logical to them. When they figure out that the Brahmins were actually the same priesthood, the Druids, came also in as the Elohim, came also in as the angels, also came in as the Malachim, then started spreading them out into every other thing like jinn and all the rest of anything that was invisible, basically. That this became the time where everything became external. Why? It's simple as Hollywood. Every star in Hollywood, because of how they're working their energy, it's externalized, they need people to actually care about them and to support them and to come to their concerts, because if not, then they're looked at as a fallen star now.
Ah.
You see what I mean? So it's the same game being played out, but it just starts in the astral plane. So some stars want to, how can I say, exact influence over celestial bodies that are in their sphere. Meaning that when you're in your city or your town or whatever, your region or your lot of land, whoever is the Lord there, because that's the term that they use, the ones who are lowered or on the ground or managing on the ground, so you see, again, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but I'm just giving you the insight of exactly the array of this hierarchy that is set up like a pyramid system. Now, it's also logic that if we're going to try to find out who would be doing any kind of civilizing and things of that nature, we need to look to our most ancient buildings, meaning buildings that are built to weather even solar storms. Do we have any on the planet? So if I arrived and I asked someone that, they say, yeah, these pyramids, there's these pyramids out in the sand. Once I saw a pyramid and I saw the triangle, I know, okay, quote unquote, those triangle boys have been here. This means they've set up civilization. They've actually started gardens, meaning that they're bringing seeds and they're bringing animals and they're bringing essences from other planets. And they're bringing it here and they're creating again. And now this is also the byproduct of it when we're actually in a reality, to hone in on this. When we're in a reality where there's so many things going on, to put our mind around how we would come up with a universal solution for everyone is mind-boggling. It's like when you ask, okay, well, what do we actually do about this? Like, everyone is different. You got some people who won't even understand what you're saying because they speak Mandarin. So let alone when you said it after, 200 years or several generations of communist rule or samurai rule or Samuel rule, that they're even going to feel like even rising up again to their true potential.
Seven, I don't mean to take it off topic, but you've got me thinking here. George Kavassilis, very dear friend of ours, he talks about the chakras and the pineal gland being implants, universal implants that are trapping us in the universal matrix. And the point is to get out of it. What are your thoughts on that? And I'd love to have you two on the show to do a roundtable, because I have a feeling that your thoughts are going to be different.
I mean, I see it as the gift and the curse. Like, I see everything, especially when you're talking about chakras and planets and anything like that, having some type of dual force. It's just energy to me. Like, you see the two triangles that are lacing mean that there can be energy, and energy is going to have its own byproduct. So I think that our mismanagement of this system could cause a hell of a problem. So now if we want to be like cowards and just say, oh, I just don't even want chakras anymore, and now you don't want to fix all the things that you've created with them, I think that would be a worse way to go out. And I think, in some of those messages I was hearing this die like a worm or die confidently, like in some of these people's messages, like, first of all, we don't die. There's this whole other purveying level of spirituality that most people are engaging in that are just really controlled from the Orion network. I just call it the tetrafields, YHVH. These type of beings are using an entirely different level of communication, which is what we call an elf wave.
Now, that's not the Orion Talk Radio Network, right?
Oh, I'm just saying it.
I'm just kidding. I'm just throwing a joke out there. We pick up a couple of shows from Orion, so I was just throwing a joke out there for the listeners that tune in regularly.
Well, again, it's Orion, but anyone that knows about the spiritual knowledge knows that that's what's going on. This is also called Goldman, and I'll show you why. Goldman Sachs. Goldman or row or ore. Let's take the word ore. Ore means gold. So row will tell you, row also means gold. You can figure that out. Then, a roar, which is what a lion does. A lion has a gold mane. Now you see that you have the row man, which basically means the gold man. And then you see the golden fleece. You see the golden ass, the golden calf. And then you see a golden age coming. And this will let you know that, okay, so finally, okay, this obviously has something to do with gold. Now, if you notice also, the Elohim have always been or had this interest in the gold, whether it's to eat it on the monatomic level or just to hoard it for its frequency that stays the same throughout the universe. Remember, gold, no matter where you take it, has the same frequency. So if you lock onto that frequency, it's going to correspond to all the other gold across all the other universes as long as it's purified. which is what the alchemical work does. It wasn't to create dirt into gold. It was to actually turn the base gold into what they call UFAS gold, meaning the gold that actually has the frequency of the rest of the gold in the universe, to contact who? The gold Orion network. The people who encased the pyramids in gold. So you see how most people are attempting to achieve even something, especially in the secret society, that only leads back to the same door of where they're trapped.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I believe what True Frequency Radio and definitely Resistance is about is we built greater expanses. We figured out the entire system like they did. We also realized if we put ourselves on a frequency, we can't be touched on that frequency to die us, to kill us. It's only to create a force much more stronger than ever before.
Exactly. Not only did we figure out the system, we built it and we did it better.
Exactly. So even the karmic laws are in our favor. We just have to know what to ask for. I always realized that there was something about just first the introspection within self. But when you're doing it on the external level, they call that praying. And they use the exact term because, of course, prey and hunting all has to do with each other. So when you learn what is the equivalent of praying if you didn't have this whole idea that God was outside? You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So now that's actually the secret to pure energy. That means that you can actually pull energy from yourself in the future when you've already tapped into free energy. Like, people just need to understand that this thing is going to go to where it needs to go regardless. And so when the frequencies start to raise, everyone will start to come into their own realization of this. Mm-hmm. And we can all tell that after a while, all this language stuff is just going to smear right away. It's not going to be the primary form that we communicate on. And so I just say that with the best we can do now is get in the know, stay stable, stay grounded. Also realize that this is our mother that we're on. We're on the planet. So we do have allies here. It's just about we can't be coerced to give up our energy to their systems and their bindings and oaths and pacts and rituals that are engaged every day. I would tell people every day is a new day for you. But every day, from every single angle, they want to bombard you with, get back in and connected and let's drink some more of your energy. And so this is all we got to do. We make this brief switch. Of course, we have quite a time up for us. I think that, regardless, we're going to have to learn the lesson. I think that's the whole reason of a universe or a university. I think right now, because Santa Claus is also Orion, you're going to see here by Christmas time what gift Orion is going to bring to all his children with his elves. You see that the angels are, of course, the elves. The words are synonymous. That the elves are what are known as cherub, meaning God commands them or rides on them. There is a priesthood that used the cherubs as an elevator, as you see the word El, to talk to this being who's on the other side, also sometimes known as the king. And this is why there's really no king presence on this world. It's more of a queen presence, because in the other world where, it's a binary world, the king, or known as the horned one, does more of the ruling there. And that's why, there's so much to this. The druids in working this magic don't want people to see the darker side of the forest. You see what I mean? All they want people to do is subtly start to like it. Like, I was watching Amazon the other day looking for some stuff for my daughter, and I saw this high Dracula coffin that was for children.
Yep.
And it was
Really?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like the parents were like, oh, you got to have one. This is the goth. This is the goth need. And notice this word God, not to cut you off. I'm going to let you go here. The God and the goth and the good are the same word, because this is the Gothic God. So even our word God is specific. And of course, it's a riddle because God is always good. That's just one more O. Why the devil is evil, which is just to take off the D. You see what I mean? So it's the play on words that have going on in front of us, acting like we're not even going to see it. And that's why I think also that whoever created the English language maybe had the interest to let us finally see how this whole thing was wired together. Maybe there's only enemies back there. That may not be true, because this has been going on for 5,000 years. Multiple lifetimes of us being caught up in some level of this, even meeting each other before. I'm sure that's going to be fun to watch once we get out of this. You get your hollow disc of all your situations. But I tell you the truth, you're not going to allow everyone to watch it together with you. like, no, there's some parts here I don't want you to see.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, though, because I'm meeting a lot more people in my soul family now at this time. It seems like everybody who I am meeting right now, I've known forever.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's it. I mean, this is the wave, man. Like, that's what this whole thing was really about. But we created it. That's one of the things about the 2012 thing is it actually gave us a deadline to create a level of expansion that was way beyond anything that we could perceive. We just have to, kill the X-Man, meaning get rid of the whole axe thing. And we could talk about that maybe when we come back on the second half, but we do need to identify who's running around here cutting off people's trees.
Who's cutting the trees, ladies and gentlemen? We'll find out on the other side right here on Truth Frequency.
There's only one choice. To resist.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Hello friends, I am the Anti-Terrorist, and you're listening to Truth Frequency.
They want to externally manipulate the body computer so it doesn't pick up these truth vibrations, these higher levels of awareness that are coming in so fast now.
It's all visible, like mind control techniques employed in the mainstream media.
And by perpetuating that fear and maintaining that throughout every level of society, it becomes really difficult to actually break through to people, to actually get them to see that they can find this love and this higher consciousness within themselves.
And this often helps a lot because some of the most elusive mysteries you're not able to apprehend them directly. You can only apprehend them by negation as to finding out what they're not.
The veil is lifted and we can see things as they are. And ultimately, we have control over that.
Seven, I want to switch the topic for just a second, but I want to get right back to it. A listener asked if you can briefly explain what the Egyptian ear cleaning technique was that you discussed with Santos on his show.
Okay, yeah, actually it's just called ear candling. And you can actually type that into your browser and you'll see these two tubes that are wax cones. And then what it is you light the top and the actual vapor pulling from the flame from the top sucks out the wax deep in the ear. And then this heightens the senses because your ears are very similar to like if you plug your nose and you try to eat something, you can't taste it. So if your ears are plugged with wax and then quite a few of your senses are dulled.
I've got to say that before I mixed down Global Resistance, I went and had my ears cleaned because I kept hearing everything really, really muffled, and people were telling me, no, it sounds nice and crisp and clear, but everything was muffled. They pulled out a piece of wax that looked like a freaking earplug. I kid you not, from each ear. That's how bad it was stuffed up. But as soon as they did it, everything sounded stereo. I was able to hear pin drops. I was able to hear little nuances and resonance in the hallways from people's shoes that weren't there before.
For sure.
Yeah. It really does heighten the senses. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's just little things like that. You know, even the colon cleansing, the indigenous were using gourds to do it. So some people were like trying to figure out, well, if we learned all this stuff now, obviously we weren't doing it before. Yeah, there were certain things that the indigenous people were doing were just common things they were finding out and about to make sure that their body was in pristine condition. I do think something that, I want to correct the situation with, because I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Casavalis or Casavis?
Cavasilis.
Cavasilis, okay. He has a certain level of the knowledge. That's what's happened. He stopped at the part where he found out that the archons infused humans with their chakra centers, basically, or wheels of time. And their information, their memory, and their DNA by mating with them. There was like basically a covenant that took place with that interaction. And so it's still important to see that we are still a product of two forces that can be seen as positive and negative coming together. So in a sense, he's right that we do have this inclination, and that's why I was saying it's our urge. Notice how most of the people who are doing crazy things, it's being carried out by humans. It's not being carried out by gods per se. So what happens is that that's how everything works in the universe. If you have something that has an immense level of power, it can also become a very dangerous weapon. So either you grow up to understanding exactly how to wield it, or you get benched again, meaning that you just sit on the sidelines of incarnations and loaf around a little bit as you spin through multiple lifetimes polarized or opposite to what you were before, so you can't recognize that you're here again. It's kind of clear also to me after summing up all the knowledge that that's exactly what's going on. I was even able to get into the deeper knowledge about how it's actually done, meaning how a soul is put back into a body again, and how the semen or carry that. But, again, we're not going to get into that kind of conversation now, but it's a micro macro thing definitely going on. So we can really get into any part of this. So we could talk about the controllers. We could also talk about, some of the deeper methods on how to remove a level or deprogram these levels of control that these archons have had held sway over people for so long.
We had a guest on recently. I don't remember his name. David Griffin, I think it was. And he talked about the moon being a place where souls are trapped and then reinserted into bodies. Have you heard anything along those lines? And if so, what are your thoughts?
The moon is, because we have to go back to the ancient text, the moon is known as the ark. They say that the ark was carrying the original seed of the masculine side of man. This is what they are saying. And this was seen as a horned God. That's what they just would call it. And so they say that what happens here on this planet, there's always, as everything came from one source, that as long as that one source is preserved, then all this will continue. So let's just say it like it is. We come from our mother. She comes from her mother. She comes from her mother. So it's basically like a fractal thing going on, where you're continuously being reproduced based on the design of the one that you previously came out of, with slight variations. So what happens if you rewind all of that and you get to the first being, the first at least creation that walks on this earth? And this is why this kind of knowledge is also pyramidal knowledge, because it's the immediate knowledge that there is an apex point. There is an actual first beginning to things. Now, of course, the knowledge begins with you trying to figure out what that is and seeing so many things until you finally realize it's everything. The last level for any type of massive spiritual awakening is to realize that you're everything. Between then is just all these refractions and mirrors and illusions of how you've served up the buffet this time of realities of what you do and do not want.
Right.
So but we can do this now. Here's the other thing. We're in a physical reality. It doesn't mean the end of the physical reality, but we can be doing great things here. And we won't even be the first civilization to do that, I believe. I mean, I'm sure there's other planets running things going on. And I'm sure a lot of those planets have accolades by now, meaning that the society developed and they did great things. They supported their children. They introduced free energy. And that's where we're actually headed next. People are like, well, what's going to happen next for us here in 2012 and in 2013? Because of course 13 is really a number that they're really working with. I can definitely say that it's the opening of our new spatial. And what that means is, if you understand physics, when you're on 3D, then you need to go to you need to have some type of fourth dimensional capability. The fourth dimension is like an elevator within itself. It's outside of time. It's like basically a place where there's a bunch of doorways to different parts of time. So to access that is humanity's next jump in their spiritual progression. That is accomplished in the dream, but there's also a planetary strength of planetary energies that come into play that actually accelerate that. Some people are already feeling that energy now, and then some people are again yet to inherit it. And so that's why we are also showing people why they could be out of tune with not receiving the energies that are really our gifts. These energies are more passive. I will tell people that. The difference between the gods and the pure energy, for better lack of words, is pure energy doesn't do any talking. It doesn't do any wars and all of that stuff. It's not identified. That's why it flows freely. So all of this agony and jealousy and hatred is the man god, run in the goddess in all the dark forces, etc., of ego, or the double eagle. Notice they use the symbol of the double eagle. The double eagle, the hated bird, as it's called in the ancient text, because it's a predator. Now notice how in Dubai, and I wanted to bring this up at least somewhere, I was bursting with it. They built this multi-billion-dollar racetrack in the middle of the desert while all these people starve, right? And they're running around with the crown on the Malachim crown on their head.
Right.
The sheikh, or the Shekinah, if you understand the connection, the Shekinah is the sheikh's wife. And so if you understand, Shekinah is a spirit. So these people are on a spiritual level. That's why they're controlling the world as such. But notice how the entire stadium is shaped like a falcon. And I was like, wait a minute, isn't that same falcon from Hinduism? The new version of Hinduism, by the way, in some parts of Buddhism. And when I realized, oh yeah, it's because if you look at the ancient text, it's an extreme predator. And this is what the archons, and that's why they were always synonymous with very bestial animals such as the snake and the lion, etc., is because the whole character they carry is something that's going to ravage and take over and hurt things. You see what I mean? So that's why there are many of us now that are equipped in this reality to put an end to these beings. Because they actually choose to exist. That's the whole thing. Like if we're looking at a reality and everything's fine and we're just making up stuff, then we got a problem. But every day I look out into the reality, even with my own two eyes, I see things that don't have to be that way. And if I know for sure that there is knowledge and information that allows us to access power that will actually rectify the situation and heal this situation to the degree of what it really needs to be done, not just talk, I have to access that. Not for myself, though. Sometimes it really does become like a sacrifice. If you start thinking about this whole thing and you got to go and pierce through all the knowledge, that means you're at least carrying a lot of knowledge in your mind, and it's disturbing you every day. So you're carrying, even what you do radio shows, you hear knowledge, that's carrying the responsibility to make sure that it actually gets to other people. It's a bridge. And so people need to also see that when you're holding a lot of information and you're delivering information, the bridge is like creaking at times with, how much you have to carry across of this message so that people start to wake up.
Right.
But now notice how also, Chris, we're also combating media. So, cause each time they make a new movie, I'm just interesting to see what they're going to actually cook up in this next, Hobbit.
Well, I wouldn't even call it media. I'd call it propaganda.
Yeah, propaganda, every single German word that I cannot even pronounce about how they really swing it. Like Mussolini said, propaganda is my weapon. Mm-hmm. And when you look at him, like if you look at Mussolini, you don't have to be a genius to see that he's possessed. And you don't also have to be a genius to see if you match his head up with the death head, meaning that the head and the skull is slightly larger. This is what they're saying about the size of the skulls of different individuals that have been here on Earth. The elongated skull, of course, they say belongs to the Anunnaki or the Anakim or the first Malachim, the angels. This long skull was as such because of the large pineal gland, etc. The next development of this same humanoid type prototype was one with a sloped forehead. A sloped forehead equals a great deal of will and determination. And then the one that came after that had a straight forehead, which means that is premature. And thus a premature, though, can birth a premature. And they have a specific word for that. So what is really being said is that the reason why humanity is sitting around waiting around for Santa Claus is that because many of them are geometrically structured to be still in their childlike stage. And that's why they have to break out of their skeleton. And this means like the whole idea of the death, which is what the embodiment of the skeleton, the marrow really is, and the bone, they break from. You see what I mean? It's like, this is a big thing that's going to happen here. Remember, we have a destiny with this, Chris and Cherie. This is not, just the knowledge of that this is going on automatically lets us know at some timeline and some point we'll come in contact with this. Let us have joy. Meaning that let us already start to build ourselves with the energy because there's a great time coming. And that allows us to pull it closer. Because you can see all they're going to try to do is rerun Aquarius, Nimrod, Odin, Orion with his guard dog, Set, Sirius, Big five-pointed star, wolf in sheep's clothing, Vatican, Canaanite, Canine. You see, like, they're just going to run that program again. But it's interesting now that there's at least, I'm on the dimension. There's quite a few others that cipher very well, like Pierre Sabak, that, man, they know about this. When the reptilians, basically the one that was being worshipped under the symbol of the reptile, went into hiding for a while, meaning something already jumped off that our ancestors freed us from a great deal of the oppressions. And they record this as the war between the Titans, who are the Anakim, Malachim, the ones that are large, versus the Olympians, which are basically humans that are activated. And so now they want to bring out their X-Men. Now, remember, X is the symbol of their God, their X God. And then they want to try to use the X-Men, or the ones who have the mental and psychic abilities, to attempt to control humanity, like what you see on Minority Report with the Cogs and Borgs, basically. Even the potential of DMT and ayahuasca lets us know if that there is some type of cocktail that's mixed up that has all the levels right, then a person is immediately thrusted into the real field of creativity.
Right.
So for us to not think that they've actually done that, seeing that, again, they're fully arrayed with scientists in every other position that they can teach a person and then lock their brain out of. Because obviously, how could you know so much knowledge and still not see the obvious? Like, some of these people are carrying like 15, 20-year degrees on stuff that it's like playing piano like somebody that's a professional. I mean, that's really born to do it. You can't even match, but still they don't see that it's all hinging on what we believe is the Most High, or our source determines who we are. That's the control point. So if they bring a lord, which they're still calling lords in Britain, they got lords still running around. If they bring a lord of the land, and then everyone's bowing down to that, the fish god, which is known as a fish because he crossed through the seas, like the Dionysus symbol. Mm-hmm. The trident also is a very deep symbol. It's the fleur-de-lis. It's the three, or the Trinity. Again, Trimurti, Solomon, 3 sons. You see what I mean? This whole idea of the triangulation and what it entails, mind, body, and soul. And so you can see there's a big thing going, or was going on. That's what I like to say. There was a big thing going on, but guess what? It's a wrap. Like, that's what people need to understand. Like, all of this type of stuff, which so many people are still trying to aspire to, that leads nowhere. We're not going to give everyone the opportunity to go and just find out that, meaning that it's a dead end. People are now seeking in spirituality, something that's going to actually get them to the next level of what they want to be. And they're not getting that. Big problem.
Seven, let me ask you something, and I hope this doesn't sound like a strange question, but I've pondered this lately, and I want to get your thoughts on it. The dinosaurs were basically reptiles that were here prior to our supposed existence here on Earth. And I've always wondered if this plane actually belongs to the reptiles and if we've taken over their planet.
No, that's not what happened. Remember in Blade Runner says, I've seen tax ships off the shoulder of Orion. I've seen things that no one's ever seen. Okay. There was a war on Orion. Orion is reptilian being. Solomon has a reptilian face, but they're the old serpent, meaning they walk upright. When they curse the serpent to the ground, according to the Bible, then the serpent doesn't have is on the ground. And then you even see serpents in our world that the legs are on the back, but they can't use them. Okay, so a long time ago, there was one that really did walk upright, aka known as the old serpent, aka Cassiel. So this whole connection is, oh my goodness, I have to grab again to your exact question. Just tell me your exact question again, because I'm going to give you the deepest insight on it.
The exact question was, does this planet actually belong to the reptiles rather than it belonging to us?
Okay, to really, really see what the reptiles were doing in Orion and how their knowledge and the fallout of their army ended up here is to understand the entire story of the Anunnaki, or the ones who fell from the sky into mainly the area we used to call Persia. So these divas, or these more advanced beings landing here on Earth, came as like a meteor shower to this planet. This also seems to be that 5,000 year ago entry into our planet by other beings. Now, when you focus back off of it, there are those who carry the Orion story, meaning they know what happened in Orion, and there was an overthrowing of that empire, and a third of them basically rebelled. And when they came into Earth, they had to come into Earth and set up a garden. meaning that when they got into this conflict in Orion, Earth was just one of the places that they chose to make an enclosed garden, meaning it's a field that over time begins to develop a full bubble around the planet, or actually then we wouldn't even look at it as a planet, but it starts to make it sustainable for life. That's when the arcs are moved in, or the moon, carrying 2 by 2, as they told Noah, 2 by 2, the chromosome or the DNA that's already, of course, divided as man and woman. You see, and this is why they're also synonymous with gardening and shepherding, because they taught the first, the other demigod taught them how to till. That was the first thing, and how to use the bull, the uru, aurochs, and how to domesticate with the plow, which became our symbol for the letter A, which actually means in Hebrew, you see it's a cow's head. So that's what they say is the beginning, the Aleph Bet. You see, so they're telling the entire story of when the ones that fell from Orion arrived here and began to in with what we call the indigenous people. So you're definitely sitting on top of that. This is undeniable. The story is fascinating in itself. But when you look at the temples of Orion out there in Angkor Wat, and then you look at how Sirius is, Egypt, also called Lower Egypt, is positioned, and Set, or the Setian monster, or Setian beast, which is actually a dog or a wolf, was in Lower Egypt, and you see that pointing to Sirius, then you can, if you are willing to believe that there might be a dominion of these kind of entities actually here, then it all starts to really connect. And then here's another thing. They at least believe it's going on. And when I mean they, like the United States and how they've configured the Statue of Liberty, how they've, basically just configured every single monumental place that's in the entire United States, and how they've, played around with the ley lines, etc. They've tapped into something. The big question to ask is, where is it leading everyone? And I don't think that too many people are equipped to really start thinking about that. So we really want to get people equipped to starting to think about that question. And then that makes us build a real future that we all can live in and our children can live in.
Very well said.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this, Seven. I should have asked you this in the beginning of the show, but can you plug your websites and YouTubes, anything you have?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're really you can find us at astroquest.com. That's really one of the easiest URLs. And, of course, that's the website that's full of massive amounts of information, kind of all the recordings that I've done, at least within the last year. And then a lot of the blogs, like you could really go back for a long time and just watch this whole progress of me coming to full realization. And that's how I kind of started, of course, with the book, The Code of the Matrix, which I'm the author of. But in there was definitely a communication with me understanding that there was some type of reptilian component here on the planet before I even knew about David Icke. Like I didn't even know who David Icke even really was. And so, just to kind of to finish off that entire topic about that, I think that what this is going to lead to is some type of realization that if we choose to become like something, then we become that indeed. Like every time these kind of portal openings happening, like what's happening in the end of this year, where everyone's coalesced all the energy and said, whatever you think is going to happen, or whatever something's going to happen, is going to happen now. You can take that and write it straight through the universe, meaning that the energy that you could pick up here can lead you all the way into the greatest expanse that you've ever seen. We're going to also slam you into the ground. Like this is something that we all have to start paying attention to. But I also believe another thing, Chris. This is happening all the time, meaning that even today a person can choose to start really changing things around for themselves and benefiting on what we really have here. It seems to be a lot of choice involved here, is what I'm saying.
Here's a great question from one of our chatters. You said that the Druids didn't want us to know what the dark side of the Force is, but wanted us to like it. What exactly is the dark side?
The dark side is basically what I call ignorance, which is it's the inability to actually see anything beyond what you're experiencing. Notice how in anger there is no thought. Like there's a consuming of thought, so there's no time to really think. It's associated with fire. And so there is a story that the original entity that these fallen angels that I was speaking about earlier, devas, that there was one leader of them that was utilizing a power that was very disruptive for our system. That's really the only way I can really say. It's like a fire or all-consuming fire. And what we're really dealing with here is that people have this, geez, I'm kind of a little bit lost on the question. Like, I do apologize.
What is the dark side of the Force?
Okay, yeah, there we go. So the dark side of this planet, again, is ignorance. It's something that when we don't choose to learn something, and then we're in this phase of non-full realization. Okay? And so in that phase, you have lots of distorted geometry, meaning beings that have gone in and out of incarnations and they haven't obtained balance. So thus their geometry is weird and what they call obtuse. This is the only way to explain it from, again, the Pythagorean and Euclidean knowledge. And so to bring forth a non-perfected star and to attempt to harness its energy into an environment that is like ours, which is known as a matrix or organic reality, it basically calls something to the equivalent of rape in that reality. And that's what's going on. And that's what Goiding was, I don't know if he got around to it. I haven't listened to any of his stuff, but that's what they're dealing with. They're bringing in forces that are distorted. So, I do apologize if earlier I was tripping up on it, but just to make it very clear, especially from the level of geometry, it's weird geometry like trapezoids. That's another piece of geometry that they use to interface with these type of things. And so it's really important for us to see that it does get crazy. And there's a lot of people who are also experiencing levels of that, especially that have gravitated towards golf and rock music, and they're basically hostages inside of their body.
There's some interesting chatter going on in the chat room. The connections between evil, live, veil, vile, all using the same letters. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, really, I think what we're dealing with is we're dealing with them talking about DNA. Like when you talk about the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, you have to see it as the knowledge of the tree of duality. So at any point, when duality starts to exist, there's something in between the two forces that is called the veil. And that's why when seen on one side, it feels like it's something that will give you life or you're going to live. When you see it from the other side, it looks like something that is pure evil. And this is why in this reality, the God that set itself up first was generally called Dios or Deus. This means two. And so this whole, again, dual principle was what they show in the garden when they said that there was a knowledge of good and evil, that there was a tree of knowledge of good and evil that was given. So again, we're talking about two opposing fields.
Let's pick it up in a moment. We'll be right back. Interesting developments in the elementary school shooting that we saw yesterday, or today, this morning, 12/14/12. It's really a travesty, but they're saying that the guy in camo was the shooter's brother who was in the woods, and that the shooter killed his mother, who was a teacher at the elementary school, prior to killing the children.
Problem is, she's not even listed as being a teacher. And they only had one witness. And she wasn't even a witness. She was just a parent at the school saying that she was a teacher. So, interesting.
The History Channel, Discovery Channel, recently did a show about mind control. And they took 100 people to see if they can mind control one of them to become an assassin, and they were able to do it with one person who was a prison guard. Now, of course, the assassination wasn't real, but they wanted to see if they can get people to do this, and sure enough. They put the truth out there, which is amazing. But Seven, any thoughts on the date of this shooting, which was 12/14/12?
Well, actually, I was talking to Cherie before the show, and I was asking her, when was the actual full moon going to happen this month? Because, of course, that would be more the peak of the energy. And she said it's on the 28th. And I think that really during this time, if they're trying to build up a certain kind of energy, we'd see basically an aggression of this kind of energy being built. So I think it's more of like a amping of possible continuous situations occurring that get people really kind of bummed out during their holiday season. Because normally this is not the cheery stuff that everyone would like to hear while linking up with family members during a Christmas season.
Well, I would take that to an energetic level too. This is the time when the earth is being reborn. It's dying. The leaves are turning brown. It's just a naturally low frequency time. And then they turn around and put this Christmas spirit right in the middle of it to send what I call syntax errors to the brain. I'm feeling one way, but I should be feeling another. And then also these stories as well, these chaotic, horrific stories.
Well, I mean, in theory, that should actually do something better for people if they have something to look forward to, and thus they can cheer themselves up during times where it's cold and kind of harsh temperatures. But, the other thing is that there's so much more that's encompassed with the story of a pine tree, oaks, again, elves, reindeer or bucks, and all the rest of what Christmas is really also about. So I think that realistically, everyone that would celebrate the holiday would love to think that it's that holiday could, it's a great holiday, and that it's something that doesn't have a real deep level of Saturnalia behind it. But that's just, it's not true. So in theory, all of this kind of stuff that's being seen on the news would be normal in a Saturnalian environment. And so that's also why I was also saying in Christianity, because of course Christmas or Xmas,
right,
connects itself to Christianity. So it's or the church or the circle once again, and them worshiping, whether any type of rite of eating flesh and drinking blood, whether it trickles down and finally trickles down into a cracker, is still in itself a ritual and a druidic ritual pulled from a specific level of knowledge. So if you see that kind of knowledge present, then you already understand, all those people were under that system. It's the Eucharist, basically. So if we had the knowledge to study all the religious systems, etc., we would start to see what's what. It's just, like I said before, they don't even want us to become doctors and lawyers. And even a doctor is not a real doctor. He's just a prescriber. That's what he is. They tell exactly what to prescribe, and that's the end. Most of the doctors don't really know how to treat a person or cure a person with real methods.
Well, I'll take it a step further. They were chastising some of the psychiatrists recently. Actually, not recently. It was a couple of years ago that I read this article. But they were chastising them because they were talking to their patients too much and not prescribing enough medication.
Oh, yeah, they give them trips. They tell them if they prescribe a certain amount, they get a trip to the Bahamas and things like that. Like, I've had some doctor friends, and they said they really push it on you. Because one of the doctor friends that I met, he was actually out on vacation, and he said, oh, yeah, they paid for this. All I have to do is sell a certain amount of, or prescribe a certain amount of prescription, which people really want to use anyway, and then they give me these free trips. So, we know what it is, but notice how, again, it's the caudaceous staff, the two entwined serpents. This is the symbol of Azazel. It's the symbol of the actual fallen angel that was teaching people that they could cure their problems through his methods. You see what I mean? It's like the god of the forest was not just wasn't teaching these people how to use the trees and things. It was saying, hey, if you get sick, you can call on me and I'll heal you. This is what was going on in the ancient times during the expansion of mankind and definitely woman on this planet. You know what I mean? So we can't act like this stuff. How many people are here on this planet that have been here for more than 120 years right now? Not many. Right. So each of our segments are like boats, basically. 120-year segment of us, or maybe let's expand it out to 200 years, and then you got a whole circle, basically. You got what's called an annual or anu. And so when you even use those words, you have to see, well, who put the word there? Like, why are we using that as a word? And then that's how you get to who the so-called controllers really are. And that's also where it's severed. But I always do tell people that this battle it's within, and it begins there and it ends there. And so what really happens, and that's kind of why I was like, okay, negativity. Now I got to explain negativity, because for me to even explain negativity, I have to also explain the difference between negativity, evil, and darkness. You see what I mean? There are three different things when you really understand how to break this stuff apart. And so those kind of things take longer dissertations. But to be clear, white and black are, to me, two forces that are exactly the same. They're the absence of color. And what happens is that if you think you're extremely white, or if you think you're extremely black, you have a tendency to do the same things. And I've noticed that with Puritans, as they call them, the one purist, they're the ones that like the Vatican. They think that, they're holy and all this kind of stuff. But how do they instill their laws and their rules? They do it by shedding blood. Then you have this array of archdemons and Al-Jabbar and all the rest of the Arabian genies on another end, and they do the same thing. They want worship 5 times a day. They want everyone to march around the cube, kiss the cube, march around it 7 times, 7 days a week, archons, moons, and all sorts of weird stuff that I think that we even get enough from our TV these days to let us know there could be something beyond this. Meaning that we have this imagination ever since we were children that says, no, man, this is... Why are we doing the Jetsons right now? What's the holdup? Why are we not in cities in the sky? Why don't we have space shuttles running on magnets ferrying us to distant planets just to sightsee? What's the holdup? And that's where we get our activity. That's why, again, this is the resistance, because, I got to get there. Like, I definitely don't want to leave Earth in a sense that I don't want to get out of here and then leave everyone here. That's not what this is about. What I want to do is I want to take my responsibility. And this is what I also say about this whole archon behavior and these chakras and all this stuff. It's just a responsibility that it's already going. We're going to have to fess up to it. No one's going to erase it. If we have to actually fess up to the infractions of our ancestors because they're living through us biorhythmically, so be it. Like, can we not stand up to that challenge and get that medal, for better lack of words, and get that experience and keep going with it? Or is it just so difficult for us to swallow that it weighs us down like a stone?
Well, what I find interesting, Seven? You mentioned the Puritans and the Vatican. These are groups that believe they're holier than thou. Right. But just the whole idea of believing that you're holier than thou takes you that much further away from the Christ consciousness that we're all trying to achieve.
Right. And again, and that's why in a prism, you get 7 colors. You get, red, blue, green, you get all these different colors. But with the white and black, they're, again, absence of color. So they're basically doing the same thing and they're acting out the same way. And they are confused that they're, just polarized. And that's also with the secret societies.
I was just about to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth. The Freemasons, the checkerboard.
Yeah, it's a checkerboard. 100%. And then the whole checkerboard set up 8 by 8. Of course, they use the 8 symbolism. It's a cube in itself. And the mathematics works very similar to the computers that we're using, that they have everything on. And that's why they would want to make everyone a number. Like, you're not, Chris Geo to them. You're 5, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4. You see what I mean? It's like because they think that they can interpret everything that we are over an Enneagram and then break it down into a number and then feed it into a system that gives them the probabilities of how well we'll expand from moment to moment. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's, again, even knowing that starts to give us the ability to move beyond that kind of, oligarchy, because there's also a synonymous relationship going on. Don't get it twisted. The king is MLK, which means Malachim, which is the abbreviation for milk, meaning that there's some type of substance or currency that we're using from the king. Like, and let us ask, are we using the king's money? Oh, yeah. That's the king's currency. Those are his talismans, his symbols, his pyramids, all his stuff is there. So either you overcome the king, or you're still engaging in still the core of how it lives. You see, so this is also the conundrum that many spiritual people are faced with when they see that it's a root. There's a root with the whole money thing and a connection when you have to transact with it with your currency. Like it controls whether you feel good or don't feel good. It just does. So it's tied directly in, and there's a reason why. I mean, a long time ago, it was very fascinating to me how a little piece of paper can do very amazing things. Humans are amazing beings. It's just all this potential. We have to be encouraged to use it for the right thing. But to move through the money situation means you have to actually conquer, aka.
Uh-oh.
Did you hit the mute button again?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I thought maybe we lost the connection.
No. I'm glad we haven't actually. There's been a clear sound. But actually, you have to, again, conquer the Minotaur in the maze. The reason why also maize is synonymous with corn is because this Minotaur, Dionysus, sailing across the sea, also bought maize or corn to the indigenous people, which totally expanded everything. You have to see how some of the simplest things back in the day would be like, especially if you had control over the seaports, which these red-haired Danans did. Meaning all of the seaports and going to China and going to different places, you can get something from China and then take it to the Americas, and the people have never seen nothing like what you're bringing. You see what I mean? So you're seen as a god. It's very easy. And so we have to see that we just came off a mode of society where, man, it looks like we're just really growing. Like we've been under the shepherding of other beings that are just kind of running it the way they want, and they think that this is good enough. It's almost like they're saying, look, if you don't think this is good enough, go build your own then. You see how it is on the TV now? They're kind of blunt with showing their symbolisms and showing how they feel and what they can do. Because all that stuff that you're seeing them do, they watch Earth on another timeline that's why the United States has never been bombed. Because they watch it before anything on Earth even starts to move. They have seers in the CIA that know what's going to happen in 3 or 4 days in the future because there's a time lag here.
Right.
You know what I mean? So when we understand that that's kind of like what we're dealing with, then we say, okay, well, what is the solution? Astral body. Astral body moves as fast as light, but light is also subject to gravity. They just, the guy did a little video on that. It's so funny. One of the biggest ideas and laws of physics is actually broken because they believe that light is not subject to gravity when it really is. It's less than mass, but it's still subject to gravity. This makes basically all those numbers and things that are in people's minds of what they think is the truth fall down like a house of cards.
Well, let me ask you this, Evan. Planetary alignments. We're moving to December 21st, and you talk about gravity. And I feel right now this polarization and this pulling, almost as if we are going through a black hole, almost as if the gravity has changed or has shifted. Any thoughts on the physical aspect of gravity shifting right now during this time?
Yeah, this is one of the things that. You can also see that it's the gift and the curse is what I was explaining before, meaning that we've developed technology that allows us to transcend through situations where there would normally be a cataclysm. Actually, we've been doing it for a long time now. I would say at least for the last 3,000 to 4,000 years, maybe even longer, the Earth has been controlled to a certain degree where it doesn't go into a major cataclysm. And that's also sometimes corresponding to why certain groups of people are not waking up either. Because those parts of the Earth are put to sleep. If you notice, like for instance, there's 7 volcanoes around me now in the Ring of Fire here in Costa Rica, off on the tip. If these things are so docile that you very seldom feel the ground shake and you do just a little bit. Now, you can see how massive they are though. So if there's that much magma and stuff moving around, but there's nothing really shaking, it lets you know there's an extreme level of manipulation to how calm the Earth is. And this was called taming Tiamat. And then of course, in this case, Marduk plays the character who actually brings the technology that is necessary to stabilize and control the Earth and make the boundaries and the regions, etc. So Earth also is like a gem in itself. If you want to see, they like jewelry. It's a gem in itself being shaped and fashioned and tamed, and many parts of it are sleep. So I think what we're really dealing with is that everything that we're going to be experiencing is going to end up being like, if we're looking for it on the outside to happen, it's going to be a continuous disappointment. Like now they got to come up with another date after the 21st of when something's going to happen. Hurricane Sandy is going to be the most that they see, is because, as you were asking before earlier in the conversation, what is Sandy? Sandy, or is easiest to know as a sand demon. Of course, people from the East send a lot of this negative energy towards the United States because they don't like us because of the whole strategy of what's been going on over there and how they're being played. So when they can consume enough spiritual energy to actually send it out, and then our shields get dropped for a moment, which happens when we see the wrong thing on TV, then our shield, which is the pentagram or New York, the Big Apple, when it gets hit, which was what you saw happen with the Hurricane Sandy and what area it really went into. So this is how the spiritual war games of the using old school tempest in her typhoon, which of course is a deity's name, typhoons to wreak some type of spiritual havoc or have some type of used as a war weapon. You see what I mean? So Earth is just in a stasis period where it's going to keep going. It's not really going to get destroyed. Like, it's the beings here that have control have an interest of keeping this going, not getting rid of everyone. They would love to scare everyone to think that, but the more the more energy there is to harness. They would pack them up into the sky if they had to on the physical reality. You have to realize exactly what's going on.
Well, you know, you mentioned volcanoes a minute ago, and it brought to mind a dream that I recently had. And apparently I'm not the only one, because I've talked about this before on air, and other people have contacted me and said, hey, I've had this exact same dream. Well, not the exact same dream, but the same scenario in this dream. I dreamt of December 21st, and Cherie and I were at Mount Shasta with William Whitecrow, and we had just got there, and in the background I noticed that Shasta was smoking. And I pointed this out to William, and he said, that's pretty interesting. And that's it. That's all the dream was. But apparently a lot of people have dreamt about Shasta smoking.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, each of the volcanoes are major meridian points in our body. And just to understand the chakra and the whole activation thing, and to see, you know, how that connects with the weather and stuff like that, if it's balanced when it opens, you only experience the glorious part of the energy. Like, there's this energy associated with the hearth of this earth, like the pranic energy, the heat or flame that keeps us warm. So what happens is that can either be used in a positive or a negative way. So, but it's still us that makes the choice. And so because this is connected to the chakra center, Shasta is actually a chakra point. Everyone knows that understands how our body lays out to these different points on the planet. And so,
which, just out of curiosity, which chakra point is it?
That's actually something I would need to look up, because I know there was also some discrepancy between if it was one or the other.
Okay, because I've been drawn to that place for some reason. I've never been there, but we're just drawn there on the 21st. And as a matter of fact, for those of you just joining us, right after Truth Frequency, we're going to do Hangar 18, which is kind of a round table with a bunch of hosts. And William Whitecrow will be joining us. We'll talk further about what's going to happen on Mount Shasta on December 21st. So stick around after the show for that. But I don't know why we're drawn there. And you mentioned it's a chakra point, so it would be interesting to find out what part of the chakra is drawing us there.
Well, yeah, because I mean, just remember that all of what we know now as far as spiritual advancement with DNA, 528 hertz, and all that stuff came from those elders out in Shasta thinking like we're thinking right now, that the whole thing was going to jump and we were going to all expand. See, remember, like, I've had the opportunity to talk even to some of the individuals that were doing what we do now, but like 30 years ago when they expected us to go into the next vibration of who we really are because the knowledge was available. Like, notice how also individuals such as Jordan Maxwell have an extremely immense body of information about exactly what's going on. So elders have already really come to give the knowledge of what is exactly is happening in the reality, but they've only been able to carry it so far. So this is also in Mount Shasta during the times of, you know, I have lots of photos of different groups that were there. And also you can see that there was a manipulation that began to take place with the individuals that were up there. And of course that would have to be in conjunction with many of the government bureaus, but them wanting to investigate also the psychic fields. But if you understand where it really came from with the RI, or also the Aryan, or the knowledge of the Brahmin, which was also passed to the faction that we know as the Axis or Hitler, then you can really start seeing that they were there in touch with what they're calling now AWAS, or which is another derivative of Yahweh. They were already in touch with the hyperdimensional God that the Israelites had been using as their shield and their protection to keeping them safe in this next expanse. And just imagine also when you're looking at a country like Israel, you have a group of people who've actually started they've started everything clean. They don't really that's why they shop with each other. They don't quarrel with each other. Most of us are still connected in some way or another, but the reason why we don't really get along is because we have different tribes and things like that actually used to be in conflict with each other. What the Israeli nation has been able to accomplish is keeping those conflicts, or pushing the reset button on their conflicts by just creating a state that has a particular group of people that don't even know where their background is. But that also creates another problem, because when you don't have a background, that means you have no roots. So that means you don't really care when it comes time to do something like what they're doing in Gaza. And that's why they're connected with Canaan, or basically an attack dog, more or less a wolf, being able to attack things.
Yeah, but that kind of ties in with what you were talking about earlier, the ancestral crimes that our ancestors committed against people that we're completely innocent of. But biorhythmically, we remember that. Because every time as Terence McKenna put it basically, whenever you die, you dissolve into your parents and your children. And then bits of yourself are scattered in both directions. And so your children are inheriting parts of you, and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so on and so forth. So how do we rid ourselves of that karma when we've got people like Israel resetting everything over and over again?
But that's also why the cure needs to be replicated too. Like, if you do perfect, the real sense of perfection, if you do bring a being through and you bring a child through and you raise that child properly, and then that child produces another child and does the same thing, then the solution is actually beginning to replicate inside of the problem and becoming more of like an antibody to the actual problem, basically the cure. So if we can basically replicate the proper vibration as fast as and faster than we can replicate the negative vibration, even for a moment, it turns the tides. And that's why I also see this 2012 point as like an open gate. Like, whatever they want to bring through it, then there's still the opportunity to bring something exactly opposite through. And that's what really, even some of our minds that have been able to think so complex, we don't really understand what our bodies and our minds and our souls are really being used to do when we choose to step into helping humanity. Like, even when you go to sleep, if you notice, like, sometimes you're carrying out some type of mission or something like that to help someone. So this means that there is still you may not have a grasp of all of it yet, meaning that you may not be in full consciousness yet, but headed there. But what is there is, it shows you that there's a hyperdimensional character running of you. Like, it's not just you here. There's an entire biorhythm of you acting out on different levels. And so I just think we just need access to that. That's really what I believe the human experience is about, and this whole experience of the universe is about. And then what's happening is we have these individuals that are trying to govern what floor you can get off on and what level you're going to be on, et cetera. And that's what I believe is being done away with in 2013. I believe they have a fear of 2013, just how they have a fear of anything being able to be turned around 180 degrees in their face. You see what I mean?
Things are turning 180 degrees right now. Mm-hmm. They really are. And people have been talking about this 3 days of darkness. As a matter of fact, you know what? Now that I think about it, we did a little after hours last weekend with Donnie Gilson, and I haven't posted that yet. So if you're tuning in and you didn't catch the after hours last week, check the archive section, because we'll go ahead and post that as well. But this 3 days of darkness that could possibly take place on the 21st, I think there's maybe a 10% chance that something will happen. China apparently is gearing up because they're buying a bunch of candles. But, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. If we had an event like that, a 3 days of darkness event, all eyes would see and all ears would hear.
Okay. They need to, like, when I really looked into it, that's why I took her video off our site. First of all, I looked deep into the person that did the proclamation, and her whole thing has just got holes all in it. But and then also the network and the source that she's really choosing to be around always has this doom and gloom message for everyone. I just started noticing that very, very consistent with that network. But here's the main thing. What they're talking about is known as the dark night of the soul. It's also in Christian lore as Jesus doing the death, the burial, the resurrection, the spending the 3 nights in hell. This is actually a period that generally occurs between the 23rd, 24th, and 25th, sometimes the 24th, 25th, 26th, this 3-day period over the Christmas time that there's like this renewal period that happens within your body. And so you actually have an opportunity to basically level up. And I tell you the truth, every time around the December time for me personally, I always have these situations begin to occur that take me into an entirely different level of what I was doing the previous year, and it keeps accelerating. So I think
7, we're running out of time. Wow. It just flew by. Thank you so much for your time. Give us something real quick.
Oh, I definitely want to say wholeness and balance to everyone. Just check us out on astroquest.com and also astroquest.tv if you want to see the interactive show. I'm definitely going to be getting with you about that. Brother, I definitely want to say thank you, brother and sister, for hosting the call tonight. And also wholeness to all of the listeners and guests. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. Kiss someone you love right now, because you never know when the last time is going to be. And don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back.